I Love Myself Fix presents Coming Into Grace, a new podcast hosted by mother and son duo at Courtney's Fix and at Asha's Fix. And today we're joined by Michael. How are you today, Michael?
I'm doing fine. How are you all?
We're pretty good. I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. It's nice to see Michael's face, and he's in the clouds. It's making me smile. So,
Yeah. You started your day off well today, Michael?
It probably as good as it's gonna get. Woke up. Yeah, it was a little late, but I got it where I needed to be on time. Doing a little bit of homework, watching BNMA, stretch a client.
Right.
Normal stuff.
Can you tell us what it is that you do? What are your passions, and also do you have an occupation? Are you in school?
So right now, as far as what I do, it's kind of a lot. I don't want to say all over the place, but I definitely have a full plate. So right now, I'm a full-time student, even in the summer. I'm an intern at BNMA fitness studio. I am a supervisor at my normal job, my night job, which is ABF Freight. I work at a City Gear as well, so I sell shoes on the side. And wow. I'm also a dental assistant in the Air Force.
Wow.
Yeah, a good amount going on.
That was that you had like a full course meal.
Just slowly waiting for it all to kind of, taper off. The working at City Gear, being a sales associate, that's short term, something to just pick up a little extra money while this COVID-19 situation is going on. Right. And then I don't plan on being at ABF too much longer anyway. I'm probably going to switch over to active duty and get a commission and do that for a couple years until I finish with, grad school and all of that.
Wow, that's amazing.
How long have you been in the service?
I have been in a little over 4 years. So okay. I started in 2016. March of 2016 is when I signed my contract.
And do you mind if I ask you why you joined the service?
Oh, I needed money for school. I got tired of paying for it by myself. So I had 2 semesters within a 3 semester span where I didn't have enough money to pay for school, and I ended up having to sit out. And I just got tired of it. I wanted to be done with school. So I knew the military. Well, actually, I didn't know they would pay for it. I was going into my job at the time, and a recruiter walked by me. And I spoke to him before, but I never paid him any attention. And he knew I was in school, so he knew how to catch my attention. And he asked me how would I feel if he told me he could pay for the rest of my school. So then I started listening, and that's how I ended up joining.
And so then you use that for dental training?
No, so that's my job in the military.
Oh,
so
got it.
I had to. That's what I do in the military. So I had to go through the training and whatnot and become certified, so that I can get to the point where they're paying for my degree.
Okay.
Wonderful.
But that's good though.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It is, but it's also kind of gross. Like I won't do it on the outside in the civilian world.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's not bad. I thought about it, but once I started seeing real patients, because when you first start your training, you're working on dummies. So once you start working with real people and doing actual procedures and whatnot, it takes a special type of person in my eyes to really want to do that. And I'm not that person.
No, there's nothing wrong with that.
Figure that out now.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm always fascinated at what line every human, and it doesn't mean you won't go past it for necessity or sacrifice, but what line we have about certain things. We all have them. So.
Michael, may I ask where you grew up?
So I kind of grew up all over the place, but originally I'm from Chicago. And then I moved to California. I'm sorry, I moved to Las Vegas first, then to California, then back to Chicago, then to Georgia for a little bit, then to Mississippi, then Maryland, back to Chicago, and then my mom finally moved back to Georgia when I was about 10, I believe, and I've been here since.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's quite a bit. Sounds something like what we did. It's kind of interesting.
How many?
We moved around quite a bit.
Okay.
At least in my opinion.
All right. You could share then. Since you brought it up.
Oh, I was born in Los Angeles. Then we moved to Oakland. Then we moved to Georgia. Then we moved back to Oakland. We stayed in Oakland for a little bit before going to San Francisco. Then from San Francisco, I went to India. And then I came back to Georgia here. But somewhere in there, we spent a lot of time in Tahoe, and we spent a lot of time, a lot of other places.
Yeah, but those were like traveling. But yes, you're absolutely correct.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Michael, what are you studying in school?
Right now, I'm studying exercise science to go into physical training and athletic therapy. I'm sorry, physical therapy and athletic training.
Oh, okay. And what do you want to do with it? Like in your mind, like if you sit there and pull out a paintbrush and you're like, bam, I'm going to design this.
So the goal is to work for a sports team, kind of get that experience, and then to eventually kind of open my own office and, do the same thing. I want to train for, the major sports, basketball, baseball, football, soccer. Learn how to train those sports as well as have the rehab side as well. That way it's kind of a one-stop shop. So that's the ultimate goal. But for now, the goal is to get my commission and then have the military pay for those degrees, practice in the military for a little bit, and then get out.
Okay. All right. And will you still be able to work with outside people during that time?
I believe so. I don't know that I'd be able to work in a physical therapy office, but I could always, train people on the side, whether it be personal training or sport-specific training. It would just be a matter of getting my name out there and kind of, starting the whole process.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah,
I always like to ask. So, who knows who's listening. So.
Right.
All right, Pop, it's on you.
Excellent.
Walking around.
This is, I don't know how to put this exactly into words, but have you always known that you were Black or African American, like since a very young age, or did you have to realize and figure out what the difference meant? And if so, at what age did you realize that?
I believe I've always known, but I never really knew it was an issue, or it never really registered that, well, not an issue, but it may be a problem for somebody else. Until I was a little bit older. But I mean, my parents have always told me, you're a young Black man. I've always known that I was Black, but I kind of grew up in a somewhat diverse environment. So I've always known a bunch of other races. Depending on the school I went to, depends on what I was around. When I was in Las Vegas, I was the darkest person in my class, and I'm paper bag brown. So it all depends. It was never an issue there. But kind of looking back, you notice little things, or it dawns on you as you get older. I think my first racial encounter, I was maybe like 5 or 6. I went to spend the summer in Vegas with my grandmother. We went to the pool. It's not a whole lot of kids in the neighborhood. It's a lot of older people. So all the kids that were there played with each other. And there was this one kid, He was a white guy. Whenever I would speak to him, he would always ignore me. And I didn't get it. I was just like, why is he being mean? Well, my grandmother told me, just don't talk to him at all. So of course I listened. But looking back on that, I realized that's probably what it was, because my grandmother also didn't talk to his grandparents or whoever he was with.
I see.
So something that she probably picked up on that as a child I wouldn't know.
Hmm. Hmm.
That was funny when you asked that, when you realized, was there a point where you thought, I remember there was a time where you weren't sure who was what.
Yeah.
I just didn't push it.
Yeah.
When he asked you that question, I always, and this is probably ended up getting a little controversial, but I always wanted the children to know that what color they were, like what color they were. And so I always called the kids brown. I wanted them to know that they were brown. And
Yeah,
so
she didn't call us black.
and so I get into bad situations with some people because they were like, but I wanted them to see what color they were first, more than that there was a cultural definition. And so I remember when Ash was little at some point, and this to me only illuminates it more, because there are a lot of people in my family, that are very fair people. A lot of them have freckles and that,
or red hair,
or red hair. We all, and so, and then we have a lot of diverse people in our family. So I remember when Ash was little, somebody started talking about race, and then
it was my teacher. My teacher kept telling me, like, we were going through like African American history, and she kept talking about black people, and I was like, I'm brown, they're brown, we're brown, they're not black. And she's like, no, honey, no, honey.
Oh, Michael, your microphone's off.
Oh yeah.
Sorry. But my girlfriend has a similar story to that. She used to get in trouble a lot, because people would say she's black, but she was like, well, I'm brown, because she's going by the textbook definition of the color. Right. So when people would say that she was black, she was like, no, I'm not. So she was getting in trouble a lot, but she was just going off of, she sees brown, so she says brown.
Well, and I wanted there to be this understanding that, if you start getting into white people aren't white, nobody's whatever these colors are that we're saying that everybody is. But I wanted the children to have a juxtaposition, to be able to sort of to step back and look. And one time at a birthday party, I do remember when Ash was young, and everybody was there, and we had family members there, and we had people of other races, and then people started talking about race, and then Ash jumped in the conversation when he shouldn't have, but it was hysterical nonetheless. And then he started trying to follow the conversation, and many of the people he tried to designate a cultural color, he was wrong. So he tried to make some of our cousins white, and they weren't white, they were light. And then and then the white people, they were something, but he was like, no, they're black. And then and then I asked him why, and all of his reasons made perfect sense why he chose the people to be whatever color they were culturally, right, because of the way that he interacted with them, not because of the color that they were. Yeah. And so, but
it took me a minute when I was a child, because my mom did a good job of letting me know like my heritage and that we were African American, but she had always sheltered me from extremely like racially tense environments, or she would like somehow buffer the information slow enough that I could take it in so I could understand it and it wouldn't shock me. So that when I come into contact with like Caucasian people a lot, I started to just realized that they were people instead of like assigning that color. But it was then from them that I got that they thought that I was white because of the way that I treated them with a level of respect and the way that I spoke, the way that I conducted myself. But I said that I was brown and that I was black. And we would always go back and forth. But as a child, once I realized that I was black, I kept wondering why I wasn't white, because white people made me feel as if it was wrong to be black. It was just
Right.
very weird.
I don't think I've ever had an instance where I think I felt it was wrong to be black. I've had instances where, because my grandmother was an English teacher, so my family is very stringent on proper language and proper way of speaking and so on and so forth. So I've had a lot of people, based off of how I talk and how I carry myself, they're like, "Oh, he's an Oreo," and I'm like, you clearly don't know a thing about me. You're going based off of how I talk, how I present myself. I don't sag. I mean, yeah, I have tattoos, but you know, they're not on my face or my neck or anything like that. Anything that you would see as the social media portrayal of a young black man. So it's like, I've had moments like that, but it never really affected me. I kind of just brush them to the side because these are young white kids that don't know a thing about me.
Right. Right.
So stuff like that. I think honestly, the only time I've ever felt really out of place around white people was when I was going to North Georgia. That school was in Dahlonega, which is all the way at the end of 400, all the way in the mountains. And I want to say out of a 10,000 person campus at the time, there was 125 black people spread across 3 campuses. So when I was there, I felt a little out of place because I couldn't really relate to any of them. We had different experiences growing up. So I think that was maybe like the only time where I was just like a little hesitant about, you know, being my normal self and kind of like changing my perception. I guess changing how I presented myself to other people so that I wouldn't be alienated, so that I wouldn't get hit with a stereotype or get into some kind of trouble because I might have been the only black kid with a bunch of white kids. So I think that may have been the only time, but I was there for a semester and I left.
Wow, that's amazing. I had to learn how to do that.
It's funny. I don't know. I've had so many experiences when I've been the only whatever, as so many people have been in so many places. So that doesn't ever bother me. I don't know. I mean, I've even been in countries where they've never met people, where they've never met anybody. You know, I've had people walk up to me, and it didn't mean anything. Yeah, and it didn't. You know, they you know, I've been at the top of Sweden, and this one guy walked up to me, and he's like, I'm not even sure what to call you, because he's like, he's like, are you black? Like, and he's trying, you know, and I didn't even know how to answer him. I was like, yeah, I'm from America, yes. Like, you know, so, but I think, I don't know, that those kind of things, there were so many of us especially, and it's still occurring, but there's so many of us of our generation, which were often the only somewhere.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so, you know, but I don't know. My feeling is, I don't know. I can go a lot of different directions because in all those classifications, they cut deep within us and
Right.
outside of us. The whole, I didn't even know people use the word Oreo anymore. So that,
You mean that's an old time?
yes, excuse me. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I said I haven't heard it at least referring to me too many
Yeah.
times, but there was a one time in high school. Like I said, I went to a pretty diverse high school, but I just had a class with a couple of white kids that I'm a friendly person and I talk to them. But I guess because they hadn't seen me interact with anybody else other than them, they just assumed that. So that one I kind of just brushed off. And again, like I said, because I went to a pretty diverse school in high school, it was odd to be the only black person a lot of times in a lot of groups at North Georgia. Um, and before I had met any of the other black people, I could only hang out with my white roommates because they were the only people that I knew. And
Yeah.
like I said, at least to me, I made myself very approachable. When I walked by somebody, I spoke. I was smiling all the time, like just trying to be more presentable so that I'm not alienated. It didn't necessarily work all the time, but like I said, once I finally met other people like me, then I kind of just started hanging out with them. I stopped hanging out with my roommates because it was awkward to me. A lot of their jokes and a lot of stuff they would make fun about, just I couldn't relate to. So
And
I
I,
think that was probably the only time where I've ever felt like that.
well, Ash and I talk about, and because I think my perspective is this, because I have traveled so much and I've deliberately
Mm-hmm.
traveled so much for this, for a lot of different reasons, but there are simply parts of our country that are all white. they just they just are in numbers. like like and I don't assume that they know much of anything about me in terms of, I guess, on a racial level. I just don't assume it. I don't,
Yeah.
because I don't assume whenever there is any environment that's isolated, that it's an isolated environment. And so I sometimes, I talk to Osh at times about percentages.
Mm-hmm.
And, and we are only at this, we know during slavery and during certain times we were the higher number, we know, we can get into that. And there's a lot of white people who don't even know that, they
Right.
don't know that history. But as it stands right now, that there are areas where there simply are not a lot of other people that are white, or there may be a large Native American population. And, and my issue isn't about being the only one or anything of that. My issue is always the same. Are you going to, whoever you are you going to try to treat me badly because I'm different from you? But
Right.
that occurs all over the world for me. So I've experienced it where nothing, there's some countries I go to and nothing happens. And then
Right.
there's other countries I go to and things happen. And, and so I think, some things the question isn't, the question isn't being the only, the question is, by being the only, are you not included?
Mm-hmm.
I believe, I think that's a different, are you not allowed to be, is there not a genuine respect about being that only? Because as
Right.
you travel, and especially if you stay in the service, you'll go around the world and you will find yourself at times, I found myself at times being the only woman in an all North African environment with a sea of men, and standing there in the middle, and was like, whoa, like this is a whoa situation, you know. Right. And it you know, and that was, you know, and so there are all these places where you can find yourself, but the question is, you know, how are you being treated? You know, I believe. But so, Michael, if you would tell us a little bit about what makes you special.
What makes me special? That's a good question. Honestly, I think it's my work ethic and determination, just based off of how I was raised. Like, I was a spoiled child, but I got all the stuff I wanted because I did what I was supposed to do. So chores, school sometimes I had a problem with homework. That was my parents' biggest gripe. My parents always told me you had to work for whatever you wanted. And you know, they've been telling me that since as long as I can remember. So that's just something I've always gone by. If it's something that I really want to do, then I'm going to keep working at it until I get what I want, or I can do what I want to do. So I think that's probably what will set me apart from a lot of other people. So I have a few friends who work ethic is pretty terrible, but I mean, they make do with whatever they can do. But like I said, mine is, I pride myself on that. If that may be like one things that will set me off and make me go off on somebody, is if they like question my work ethic or try to downplay it, because I do take so much pride in it. I think that's probably what'll make me special.
Okay, all right. And anything else you have?
I was just going to ask if you had any questions for us.
What is that? Oh, I guess what made you all start the podcast?
You want to do it first?
For me, when we first started doing the recordings, really for me, I find that when I talk to people, that I find that the conversation is often, some point in the conversation, they say negative things to themselves, no matter who they are. And there was something about talking to people, and when I talk to people, I hate to hear them say negative things about themselves. It's different from a joke, you know, like I'm clumsy. I am clumsy. So, but there was something about that to me where I wanted to go around and talk to people and have them say out loud what it was that they felt that was special to them. And if I could go around and do that enough, maybe they would continue to repeat it or just hear it and feel good about it. And me, I love to see people state those gifts out loud and look at their faces. And then as this evolved, it became one of where I ended up talking to, I have a lot of friends who are males, and I have a lot of friends who are Black males. And they mean so much to me. And I was close to a lot of strong Black males growing up who are phenomenal men. And I realized that somewhere in these conversations that they were not feeling good about themselves. Right. And I thought that if there was a way that I could touch them or they could even say it out loud on camera. And then it sort of extrapolated it in terms of the times of where we are, and that the perception is that men don't have these gifts. And even some women don't even think men have these gifts, or that they feel this way about themselves. So to me, that's what I started the podcast for all those different. So
That makes sense.
Yeah. I started the podcast. Well, we started the podcast. My reason for joining her is because I feel that there's so much pressure on African American men and women, but there's a different kind of pressure on African American men that is from the world, and part of it is just from ourselves because of our culture. I don't believe we are taught to let much of anything out, or talk to anyone, or try and deal with or handle our issues any other way than putting it behind us and just keep moving forward. And I felt that having this space, showing the world the beauty and the life of African American men, will bring other African American men to the forefront to do the same and to recognize their beauty. That's why at the end we have every single person we interview, we have them say, "I love myself" to the camera.
Which is where you're headed, Michael.
Yes.
But that makes sense. I can agree with what you said, because I can recall not too long ago actually, where I kind of just internalized everything. I didn't really tell anybody if I needed help or whatever I was dealing with. I kind of just got to that point. I don't know, probably sometime after I turned 21 or 22, and I'm 25 now. So that makes, I can agree with that.
Very interesting play.
What'd you say?
I said it's a very interesting play.
Yeah.
Michael, you want to? I see you're melting out there. Is there anything else you want to
No, that's all I have for right now.
Okay. I appreciate that you said for right now, which means you're going to come back and share something else.
Definitely.
All right. If you would, and first, before we even do that, I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day and sharing yourself with us. It means a lot.
No problem. Thank you for having me on the show.
If you would, look at the camera and say, "I love myself."
I love myself.
All right. Look at that smile. Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem.
I love myself too.
I love myself too.
All right. Everyone, thank you for watching Coming Into Grace, knowing who we are and loving ourselves for it. See you soon. Bye, Michael.
See you later.